The dying world, the city of Kisara, burned beneath alien skies. Velthar pressed his trembling hands against the cracked console, watching through the command center's shattered windows as another tower collapsed into rubble. The enemy, they had no name worth speaking, had arrived 3 cycles ago with overwhelming force. His people, peaceful traders and scholars, had possessed no weapons capable of matching such brutality. Now, only silence answered his desperate calls to neighboring systems. "We must face the truth," whispered Torin, his oldest advisor, voice hollow with grief. "No one is coming. The great empires have chosen neutrality over justice." Velthar's chest tightened. He thought of the children hiding in the underground shelters, of the elders who remembered better days, of all those who trusted him to find a way forward. But what way remained when even the stars turned deaf? "Then we send our signal further," he said quietly. "Beyond the known territories. Into the dark spaces between." Torin's eyes widened. "The uncharted regions." "Velthar, nothing civilized lives out there. Only deathworlds and barbaric species too violent to—" "We're dying anyway." Velthar's voice cracked. "Let me try." Across the void, on a blue planet orbiting a yellow star, Mira Castellan sat in the quiet hum of Earth's deep space monitoring station. The night shift was typically uneventful, mostly tracking commercial vessels and logging stellar phenomena. She'd been rotating the same mathematical puzzles in her head for hours when the equipment suddenly screamed to life. Her coffee mug crashed to the floor. The signal was unlike anything in the database, raw, unfiltered, desperate. Mira's fingers flew across her interface, isolating the transmission. Then she heard it. Not words exactly, but the universal frequency of anguish translated by their systems into something heartbreakingly clear. "Help us, please. We are dying." Mira's breath caught in her throat. She initiated emergency protocols, routing the signal to Defense Command while downloading every fragment of data. Within minutes, her terminal lit up with incoming calls from superiors who'd never contacted her directly before. Admiral Jonas Reeves' weathered face appeared on her screen, his gray eyes sharp despite the late hour. "Officer Castellan, you're certain this isn't a simulation or enemy deception?" "Sir, I've run every verification protocol twice. It's genuine." She pulled up the spectral analysis. The source is approximately 47 light-years away. The distress markers are consistent with an active planetary siege. Reeve was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. Mira had studied his history, a veteran of the colony wars. He'd seen humanity at its worst and fought to preserve its best. She held her breath. "They sent it blind," he finally said. "Didn't even know we existed, just screamed into the darkness hoping someone would care." "Yes, sir." Another pause. Then Reeves' expression hardened into something that made Mira's pulse quicken. She recognized that look from history documentaries. The face humanity wore when it decided to walk into hell for strangers. Prepped the Third Fleet for immediate deployment. "I'm calling an emergency council session." His eyes found hers through the screen. "Good work, Castellan. You just changed the course of history. Pack a bag. You're coming with us as communications liaison." "Sir?" Mira's voice came out smaller than intended. "Someone needs to tell those people that their message was heard. That someone's coming." "Might as well be you." The screen went dark. Mira sat frozen, heart hammering, as the reality crashed over her. Somewhere far away, people she'd never met were dying. And humanity, strange, stubborn, death-world humanity, was about to do what no one else would. They were going to answer the call. First contact through fire. The transit through slipspace felt like drowning in stars. Mira gripped her seat restraints as the valiant Dawn shuddered back into normal space. Admiral Reeves' flagship leading a formation of 37 warships toward the Kisara system. Through the viewport, she could see the planet, once beautiful, now wrapped in smoke and fire. "Contact in 40 seconds, announced Lieutenant Darren Cross over the general channel. His fighter squadron hung in perfect formation off the carrier's port side, small and deadly against the void. "Enemy fleet detected, counting 28 capital ships, multiple support craft." Mira's stomach twisted. They were outnumbered. All ships. Battle stations. Reeves' voice cut through the tension like a blade. "We didn't come this far to turn back. Show them what happens when you ignore a cry for help." On Kisara's surface, Nisara crouched in the remains of what had once been a medical center. Her medical supplies were nearly exhausted. Her patients, those still breathing, lay in makeshift beds surrounded by rubble. She'd been awake for 2 days straight, working by the light of emergency lamps while the enemy bombardment continued overhead. "Nisara!" Her assistant, Pren, stumbled through the doorway, his face pale with shock. "Something's happening. Ships, new ships, they're fighting the invaders." Nisara's heart lurched. "That's impossible. No one answered our signal. Come see." She followed him outside into the ash-filled air. Above, the sky had transformed into a war zone. Streaks of weapons fire crisscrossed the darkness, and for the first time since the invasion began, enemy vessels were exploding. The new arrivals fought with a ferocity that seemed almost reckless, closing to impossible ranges, executing maneuvers that defied tactical logic. One small craft dove straight through enemy fire, its weapons carving through a cruiser's shields before peeling away at the last possible second. Nisara watched in stunned disbelief. "They're insane," she whispered. "They'll get themselves killed, but they didn't die. Or rather, when they did die, it only seemed to make the others fight harder." Darren Cross's fighter sang through the void, his reflexes honed by years of training in Earth's punishing gravity. The enemy ships were powerful but predictable. They relied on overwhelming force rather than creativity. Humans had learned long ago that creativity was what kept you alive. "Fox 3, breaking left," he called, rolling his craft through a gap in the enemy formation that shouldn't have existed. His missiles found their mark, crippling a destroyer's engines. Around him, his squadron moved like a school of predators, each pilot trusting the others completely. This was what humans did. They'd been apex predators on a world that tried to kill them daily. Every instinct had been sharpened by survival. All fighters. "Regroup at Checkpoint Delta," ordered Squadron Leader Chen. "We're pushing through to their command ship." "Copy that." Darren checked his fuel reserves. Running low, but enough. Behind him, Earth's larger vessels were systematically dismantling the enemy fleet. The invaders had expected fear and hesitation. Instead, they'd encountered controlled fury. Aboard the Valiant Dawn, Mira worked frantically at her console, finally breaking through the interference to reach the surface. "This is the Earth vessel Valiant Dawn to any Kesseran receivers. We've received your distress call. Help has arrived. Please respond." Static hissed for several heartbeats. Then a voice, shaking, disbelieving. This is Council Leader Velthar. You came. By all the stars, you actually came." Mira's eyes burned with sudden tears. "We heard you. We're not leaving until you're safe." On the surface, Velthar sank to his knees, the communicator clutched in his hands. Around him, the survivors who'd heard the transmission began to weep. Some laughed. Others simply stared at the sky where impossible things were happening. "Who are you?" Velthar managed to ask. "What species fights like this?" Mira glanced at Admiral Reeve, who nodded permission. "We're called humans. We come from a world called Earth." "Earth," Velthar repeated the word like a prayer. "Thank you." "Thank you." Above the planet, Darren's fighter took a glancing hit that sent his system screaming warnings. He compensated, but another blast caught his port engine. The craft began spiraling toward the atmosphere. "Cross is hit," someone shouted. "He's going down." Darren fought the controls, trying to angle his descent away from populated areas. Through the cockpit, he could see the scarred surface of Kasara rushing up to meet him. His last thought before impact was oddly calm. At least he'd made a difference. At least someone had heard them scream. Foothold in the ashes, the fighter hit ground hard, carving a burning trench through the ruins of what had once been a residential district. Metal shrieked and tore as the craft tumbled end over end before finally slamming into a collapsed building and going still. Nisara saw the crash from 3 blocks away. The vessel bore markings she didn't recognize, one of the mysterious rescuers. Without thinking, she grabbed her emergency medical kit and ran toward the smoke, ignoring Pren's shouts of warning. The cockpit had cracked open during impact. Inside, she found him, the pilot, her first human. He was smaller than she'd expected for a warrior species, though his body was compact with dense muscle. Blood, red like her own, ran from a gash across his forehead. His breathing came shallow and rapid. Nisara's medical training overrode her fear. She checked his vitals with trembling hands, relieved to find his anatomy similar enough to her own that she could work with it. "Stay with me," she whispered in her own language, then realized he wouldn't understand. She switched to the universal trade tongue. "You're going to survive this." Darren's eyes flickered open, unfocused. He saw a face hovering above him, Delicate features, skin with a subtle iridescent shimmer, eyes that held both terror and determination. "Angel?" he mumbled in English. "I don't know that word," Nisara said, applying pressure to his wounds. "But you're safe. You came to save us. Now let me save you." The sound of enemy patrol drones grew louder. Nisara's heart hammered. If they found the downed pilot, they'd kill him and everyone nearby. She made a split-second decision, hooking her arms under his shoulders and dragging him toward a nearby shelter entrance. Darren groaned, consciousness fading in and out. He tried to help, his legs pushing weakly against the rubble. Together, they stumbled into the darkness of an underground passage just as the drones swept overhead, their searchlights cutting through the smoke. In the shelter, Nisara laid him carefully on a medical cot. Other survivors watched with wide eyes, some fearful, others curious. She worked quickly, cleaning wounds, administering what painkillers she had, setting a fractured rib with careful precision. "One of them," someone whispered. "One of the Deathworlders. He's injured," Nisara snapped. "He came here to help us. We will help him." Meanwhile, above the planet, Captain Helena Voss led the ground assault. Her dropship hit atmosphere like a meteor, accompanied by 24 others carrying Marines and relief supplies. The enemy's orbital blockade was breaking, their forces in disarray from the unexpected ferocity of the human fleet. "All units, establish perimeter at Landing Zone 7, Helena commanded, her voice steady despite the turbulence. "Priority is civilian evacuation. Rules of engagement, anything hostile gets put down hard." The dropships landed in a blast of retro thrusters, ramps dropping before they'd fully settled. Helena was first out, rifle raised, scanning the devastated cityscape. Her Marines deployed with practiced efficiency, immediately engaging enemy ground forces that had turned toward the landing zone. The battle was brief and brutal. Humans moved through the ruins like they'd been born to urban warfare, which in many ways they had been. Earth's history was written in cities fought over, block by bloody block. Within an hour, Helena's forces had secured a kilometer-wide safe zone and begun gathering survivors. The Kasarans came hesitantly at first, frightened by these new aliens who moved with predatory grace and carried weapons that spoke with thunder. But when they saw humans kneeling beside injured children, offering water and medicine, fear began transforming into cautious hope. Aboard the Valiant Dawn, Mira worked with Velthar to coordinate evacuation points. His voice had strengthened over the past hours, disbelief giving way to cautious optimism. "Your Captain Voss is asking for population distribution data," Mira said, pulling up the maps he'd transmitted. "She wants to prioritize areas with the most civilians." "I'm sending it now," Velthar replied. Then, more quietly, "Officer Castellan, Mira, why? Why would your people risk so much for strangers?" Mira paused, considering. "Because once, long ago, we were the ones screaming into the void." "Because we know what it's like to face extinction. Because—" She smiled sadly. "Because walking away would make us something we refuse to be." In the underground shelter, Darren woke to find Nisara checking his bandages. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition of shared mortality, gratitude, curiosity. "Thank you," he managed in halting trade tongue. "You saved me," Nisara's expression softened. "You saved us first." Outside, the sound of human weapons fire grew closer, not attacking, but clearing the area of enemy remnants. They were coming for their pilot. They were coming to keep fighting. And for the first time in weeks, Nisara allowed herself to believe they might actually survive this. Strangers become allies. 3 days after the initial battle, an uneasy rhythm had settled over Kasara. The enemy fleet had retreated beyond the system's edge, regrouping but no longer actively bombarding the planet. Human forces maintained a defensive perimeter while continuing rescue operations. In the underground shelter, Darren was healing faster than Nisara expected. She'd learned that Deathworlder biology came with accelerated recovery, another adaptation from their brutal homeworld. "Tell me about Earth," she said one evening, sitting beside his cot while checking his vitals. The other survivors had grown comfortable with his presence, though children still watched him with wide, curious eyes. Darren smiled, the expression transforming his combat-hardened features. "It's beautiful. Dangerous but beautiful. We have oceans that could swallow this entire city. storms that rage for weeks, predators with teeth longer than your hand. He caught her alarmed expression. But we also have quiet forests, mountains that touch the sky, nights when you can see 1 billion stars. It sounds terrifying, Nisara admitted, though her tone held fascination rather than fear. It was. You learn to respect it, or it kills you. He shifted carefully, wincing at his healing ribs. That's why we're like this, why we fight the way we do. Every human alive is descended from survivors who refused to quit when the world tried to kill them. Nisara processed this, her medical mind intrigued by the evolutionary implications. And you chose to leave that world to come save mine. Their gazes locked. Something warm unfurled in Darren's chest, an awareness of her that went beyond gratitude. The way she moved with quiet confidence, how her eyes reflected lamplight like gemstones, the gentle strength in her hands when she changed his dressings. Someone had to, he said softly. Besides, I couldn't let you face this alone. Nisara's breath caught. She'd been so focused on survival that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as something other than a medic or a refugee. When was the last time someone had looked at her like she mattered beyond her usefulness? You didn't know me when you came, she whispered. I know you now. The moment stretched between them, fragile and profound. Then, voices echoed from the tunnel entrance. A human patrol had finally tracked Darren's emergency beacon to this shelter. Above ground, Mira worked from a temporary command center established in what had once been Kessera's governmental complex. She'd barely slept since their arrival, coordinating with fleet operations while managing the delicate diplomacy of occupation, even a friendly one. Velthar visited daily, bringing updates on survivor counts and resource needs. Their conversations had evolved from purely professional to something more personal. He'd shown her Kassaran poetry, taught her about their culture's emphasis on knowledge preservation. She'd shared human music, explaining the concept of blues, songs born from suffering that somehow made the suffering bearable. Tonight they stood together on a balcony overlooking the recovering city. Human engineers worked alongside Kessaran technicians to restore power grids. The sound of construction equipment mixed with the evening winds. Your people are remarkable, Velthar said quietly. Not just as warriors, but as builders, as friends. Mira watched the lights flicker on in a residential section that had been dark for weeks. We remember what it's like to rebuild. Earth has burned more times than we care to count. We learned that what matters isn't avoiding destruction. It's what you do afterward. Velthar turned to face her, his expression vulnerable in the dim light. When this is over, when your fleet leaves, will you forget us? No. Mira met his eyes, surprised by the intensity of her own emotion. I could never forget this. Forget you? His hand moved tentatively toward hers, hovering uncertain. She closed the distance, their fingers intertwining. Different species, different worlds, yet the warmth of connection translated perfectly. I've been alone in leadership for so long, Velthar confessed. Responsible for so many, connected to no one. But when I speak with you, you don't feel alone, Mira finished. I understand. Command is isolating. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their people work side by side below. Mira thought about the improbability of this moment, that a desperate signal across the void could lead to this fragile, precious connection. In the shelter, Darren was finally cleared for transport back to the Valiant Dawn. As the Marines prepared to move him, he reached for Nisara's hand. Come with me, he said impulsively. To the ship. We have better medical facilities. You could rest, eat real food, sleep in safety. Nisara hesitated, looking at her patients. Pren stepped forward. Go, we can manage. You've barely rested since this began. She turned back to Darren, saw the hope in his eyes, felt the answering warmth in her chest. This warrior from a death world who'd crashed from the sky had become something unexpected, a possibility of joy amid destruction. Yes, she said. I'll come. As they emerged into the open air, Nisara saw human vessels crossing the twilight sky, and for the first time since the invasion began, she felt something beyond mere survival. She felt the stirring of a future worth living for. Dawn of New Bonds 2, weeks after the battle, Kessera had transformed from a dying world into one learning to live again. The enemy had not returned. Intelligence suggested they'd withdrawn entirely from the sector, unwilling to face Earth's forces a second time. Humanity had earned its reputation, help those who called, and fight like demons for them. Aboard the Valiant Dawn, Nisara walked the medical bay with newfound confidence. She'd spent the past days working alongside human doctors, learning their techniques while teaching them Kesseran physiology. The exchange had been remarkable. Two species discovering that healing transcended language. Darren found her there during the evening shift, his injuries finally healed. "Looking for someone?" she asked with a smile that had become familiar between them. "Always," he replied, that warmth in his voice that made her heart skip. "Walk with me?" They made their way to the observation deck, where the curve of Kasara filled the viewport. From orbit, the scars of war were visible but fading as restoration efforts continued. Darren stood close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I've been offered a position," he said quietly. "Liaison assignment, building a permanent Earth presence here to help with reconstruction and train your defense forces." Nisara's pulse quickened. "Will you accept?" "Depends." He turned to face her fully. "I need a reason to stay. A good reason." She met his eyes, seeing vulnerability beneath the warrior's exterior. In the past weeks, they'd shared stories, dreams, fears. She'd learned about his childhood in Earth's mountains, his decision to enlist after losing his family to a colonial disaster. He'd listened to her describe Kasara before the war, her love of medicine, her fear that she'd never feel safe again. Somewhere along the way, he'd become her safety. "I want you to stay," she whispered. "Not just for Kasara, for me." Darren's hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness, his touch reverent. "I was hoping you'd say that." When their lips met, it was soft and exploratory, two beings from different worlds learning each other's language of affection. Nisara felt tears slip down her face, but they were tears of relief and joy rather than grief. Darren kissed them away, his arms wrapping around her as if she were precious and fragile. "I'm not fragile," she murmured against his shoulder. "I know. You're the strongest person I've ever met." He pulled back to look at her. "You saved me when you had every reason to leave me for dead. You trusted me when I was just another alien warrior. You're extraordinary." On the planet's surface, Mira and Velthar walked through the rebuilt council chambers. Human architects had worked with Kesseran designers to restore the building, blending two aesthetic traditions into something beautiful and new. "The formal alliance treaty is ready for signatures," Mira said, though her tone suggested she was delaying the moment. "Once it's signed, most of our fleet will depart, leave you to rebuild in peace." Velthar stopped walking, turning to face her. They'd grown closer during these weeks of working together, late nights planning reconstruction, shared meals discussing philosophy and politics, quiet moments when words weren't necessary. "And you?" he asked. "Will you depart as well?" Mira hesitated. She'd been offered a promotion, return to Earth, take a command position. It was everything she'd worked toward. But the thought of leaving felt like tearing away part of herself. "I could request a diplomatic posting," she said carefully. "Earth's first ambassador to Kasara, if that's something you'd want." Velthar's expression transformed with hope and something deeper. "Want?" "Mira, these past weeks working beside you have been the first time I've felt truly alive since the war began. Your perspective, your humor, your compassion. You've reminded me that leadership doesn't have to be lonely." He took her hands in his, the gesture now familiar between them. "I've fallen in love with you. Perhaps it's too soon, perhaps I'm a fool, but I can't let you leave without saying it." Mira's heart soared. "Then I'm a fool too, because I love you, Velthar. Somehow, impossibly, completely." They kissed there in the restored chambers. A Kasaran leader and a human officer sealing a personal alliance that mirrored the one between their worlds. 3 months later, a ceremony was held in Kasara's rebuilt Central Plaza. Admiral Reeve stood beside Velthar as they signed the formal treaty of friendship and mutual defense. Thousands watched, both Kesseran and the humans who'd chosen to remain and help rebuild. Darren and Nisara stood together in the crowd, his hand intertwined with hers. She wore a pendant he'd given her, a piece of earth stone carved with both their languages saying, "Home is where you're understood." He wore a Kesseran medical insignia she'd pinned to his uniform, symbolizing the healer who'd saved him. Mira stood at Velthar's side in her new role as ambassador. wearing traditional Kesseran diplomatic colors blended with her Earth uniform. When the signing concluded, Velthar took her hand openly, and the crowd erupted in celebration. As night fell and festivities continued, Darren pulled Nusara close on a quiet balcony away from the noise. "No regrets?" she asked. "About leaving Earth?" "No. Earth will always be home, but home isn't just a place." He kissed her forehead. "It's wherever you are." Nusara smiled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. The medic and the warrior. "We're a strange pair. The best things are." He tilted her chin up. "I love you, Nusara. Every complicated, beautiful part of you." "I love you too," she whispered. "My Deathworlder who taught me that the strongest survive not through violence, but through choosing what to protect." Above them, both Earthships and restored Kesseran vessels crossed the night sky in formation, a joint patrol ensuring the peace they'd fought so hard to win. Two species had found each other in the darkness, called together by a desperate signal and bound now by friendship, respect, and love. The stars had answered, and in answering, they'd discovered that the void was never truly empty, not when someone dared to call out, and someone else dared to answer. Somewhere across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered. Humanity had announced itself not with conquest, but with courage, and the galaxy would never be the same.